let's talk about the most thrilling topic we've had on this channel to date. Taxes. Yay! So fun. But seriously, you may have heard about there being a gluten-free tax credit and wondered how you can get it. Well, today I'm going to walk you through what the tax credit is, how I've applied for it in the past, and most importantly, whether or not it's worth doing. So buckle in. I will try my best to keep this as fun and not confusing as possible. But before I start, I just want to say I am not a tax professional. I'm just a regular gal trying to save money over here. So be sure to talk to your accountant before you claim or decide not to claim the tax credit. Also, I'll be getting into the specifics on applying for the tax credit in Canada, since that's what I have experience with. From what I can tell, there are a lot of similarities between the Canadian and the US tax credit, so even if you're not Canadian, there should still be some helpful takeaways for you in this video. But again, always talk with your accountant. Every day. There's going to be a ton of information in this video, but for anything more specific, be sure to check out the Celiac Associations. So for my fellow Canadians, the Canadian Celiac Association, and for my American friends, the Celiac Disease Foundation. All links are in the description below. All right, let's start this off by covering, am I eligible? The gluten-free tax credit is one of the many medical expenses that you can claim on your tax return. You're only eligible for the tax credit if you've been officially diagnosed with celiac disease, meaning that you have written proof of your diagnosis from your health professional. So, if you've been debating getting tested for celiac disease, this is another reason to do it. If you have this documentation, then you're eligible for the tax credit. If you're gluten-free for any other reason, even if it's health-related, unfortunately, you are not eligible. Don't shoot the messenger. I would give you all the tax credits if I could. So now that 90% of people have clicked out of this video because they either don't have celiac disease or they don't have proof that they have celiac disease, let's keep going. How does it work? There are several key things to be aware of when applying for the credit. The amount you can claim is the incremental cost of gluten-free food. Incremental? What's that? I sound like a witch. Meaning the difference in cost between the gluten-free product and the regular product. For example, if gluten-free bread costs $8 and regular bread on average costs $3, then you can claim the difference, which is $5. Next, your medical expenses must be more than 3% of your net income or $2,421, whichever is less. I don't know why it's so specific, $2,421, but you do you, CRA. Anything over these amounts is the medical expense that you can claim on your tax return. Now, this doesn't have to be just your gluten-free expenses, but all of your medical expenses that you paid for out of pocket or the portion that wasn't covered by insurance, like, for example, dentist visits. This is one area where if you live in the US, it's a little bit different. I believe the medical expenses must be over 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. Don't know what counts as adjusted gross income. So that's why I've linked the Celiac Disease Foundation link for you below. And the last key thing to be aware of is that it's only for the amount of gluten-free food that's being eaten by the person with celiac disease. So let's say that you have a completely gluten-free household and you're the only one with celiac. You can only claim the portion of food that you eat yourself. I'm not quite sure how they would track what food was eaten by whom if you were audited, but I'm just presenting the information. What does it include? It includes all gluten-free products that you buy. Bread, flour, oats, frozen pizzas, granola bars, cookies, muffins, etc. It can also include things like sauces, for example, gluten-free soy sauce. You can also claim any items that you have to buy for your gluten-free diet that you wouldn't normally have to buy on a regular diet. The best example is xanthan gum, which is used in gluten-free baking. If you buy a whole bag of xanthan gum for $16, then you can claim that $16 on the tax return. You can also claim restaurant upcharges for things like gluten-free bread, buns, and pizza crust. It does not include naturally gluten-free foods. The exception, though, is if the naturally gluten-free food is marked gluten-free. Stay with me here. So, if you bought a bag of rice at a grocery store that was labeled gluten-free, you could claim it. But if you bought a bag of rice at the same grocery store that was not labeled gluten-free, you couldn't. Easy peasy pie. For all of these foods, you have to keep your receipts as proof of purchase. Like this. I hope those weren't like in order. Knowing all of that, you might be wondering, is it worth my time? There isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to this question. It all comes down to whether you buy a lot of gluten-free products, have a high net income, and or have a lot of other medical expenses. I've seen some hot debates online. People feel very strongly that it's worth their time or not worth their time and try to encourage other people to do it or tell people to stay away, and it's all because it really comes down to the individual. For me, at the time of my diagnosis, I was a self-employed actor and I didn't have health insurance, so all of my medical expenses were paid out of pocket. Because of my low net income, thank you, acting career, and high health expenses, it was absolutely worth it for me. On the flip side, if you're a salaried employee with health insurance and most or all of your health expenses are covered, it might not be worth your time. The exception, though, would be if you have any dependents who also have celiac disease. How I tackle my receipts in an hour each year. As someone who struggles with organization, I don't have a running spreadsheet that I update on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis. As a wise soul once said, ain't nobody got time for that. And unless you're absolutely certain that you will qualify for the tax credit, keeping a running total might be a waste of your precious time. So here's how I tackle my receipts in an hour each year. I keep every receipt in a large envelope, like this one, helpfully labeled GF items. Well, that's not quite true. I usually put them in my wallet until my wallet gets inconveniently full, and then I take them out and put them in the helpfully labeled GF items envelope. Then at tax time, after calculating my net income, I decide if it's worth it to go through all of the receipts. Example, let's say that I made $50,000 in net income and had no other health expenses. My gluten-free costs would have to exceed $1,500 or 3% in order to qualify. For reference, my first year eating gluten-free, which was the year when I bought the most gluten-free products I've ever bought, I spent an extra $642. So in this example, I wouldn't be anywhere near $1,500 of expenses. I wouldn't bother tallying up all my receipts. They would just go straight to the recycling bin. This is why, if you were recently diagnosed with celiac disease, it might be helpful to add up your receipts that first year of being gluten-free. That way, you can get a ballpark number on how much you would typically spend on gluten-free products. Each tax season, you can determine your net income and use that ballpark number to decide if it's worth going through your receipts. If you do decide it's worth it to claim the medical expense, here's what I do. First, I take a receipt out of my envelope. Next, I highlight the gluten-free item so that it's easy to see in case I ever have to recount. Then I create a tally for each food category, like bread, crackers, gluten-free oats, soy sauce, etc. Whenever I had one of those items on a receipt, I would place a tally mark in that category. You can also just put the amount per item into a spreadsheet so that you can calculate the average cost later. Once I finished going through the receipts, I would add the number of items in each category. Then I would put it into my spreadsheet. On your spreadsheet, you list the product type, the number of products bought, the average cost of the gluten-free product, the average cost of the regular product, and the incremental cost, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the difference between the gluten-free product and the regular product. Then you multiply the incremental cost by the number of items in each category. To get the cost of the regular product, you can look online, you can look in flyers, or you could even take a picture of the price tag at a grocery store. You can look for the lowest price possible. Just be sure that you have evidence in case you were ever audited. And be sure to do this for each category. Pro tip, if you notice that a regular box of cookies is twice the amount of the gluten-free box of cookies, then you can divide the cost of the regular one in half so that they're the same. Or if you're a math nerd like me, you can price it out per gram. Just make sure that it's well documented. As I mentioned earlier, you can claim the whole amount for gluten-free specific items like xanthan gum, so I added extra rows for those items. You can also add up all of the extra charges from restaurants. For example, if you have a receipt that says gluten-free upgrade for $2 or gluten-free pizza crust for $4, you can add all of those together. Finally, you can add up the incremental cost of all of the categories and bam, that's the amount you can claim. If you hate spreadsheets, I promise this isn't as scary as it sounds. This whole process took me maybe an hour every year, and it was totally worth it for me the first couple years after my diagnosis. All right, in case all the numbers talk made your head spin, here's the long and the short of it. If you're a high-income individual with minimal health expenses, you most likely won't be able to take advantage of this credit. If you're a lower-income individual and you have other health expenses, you very likely will be able to take advantage of it. If you make variable income or have variable health expenses, it may be unclear as to whether or not you can claim it. In my opinion, hang on to the receipts and then decide at tax time whether or not it's worth going through all of the receipts. If you're a super organized human and you know that you'll be claiming this tax credit, feel free to keep a running spreadsheet on a monthly, weekly, or quarterly basis. But if you're a little bit of a hot mess like me, just know that it's totally fine to get her done at tax time. So, 7 years into my celiac diagnosis, do I still claim this tax credit? Not right now. If you watched my How to Save Money When You're Gluten-Free video, you'll know that I reduced my spending on gluten-free products by 60%. Over the years, I stopped buying as many packaged gluten-free products and started buying more naturally gluten-free options. I also make all of my gluten-free bread at home, which was my largest expense after going gluten-free. Now that I've changed the way that I shop and bake, I don't spend enough extra on gluten-free products to qualify for the tax credit. If you're curious about the numbers, I was spending, on average, about $9 for a loaf of gluten-free bread. Making bread at home cost me just over $3 per loaf. If you're a loaf a week kind of person, that's over $275 saved every year. If you want to learn how to make my homemade bread, be sure to check out my gluten-free baking courses. There is a delicious basic bread recipe in the Essentials course, and you can learn how to make over 9 different types of loaves in the bread course. All right, if you have any additional questions about my experience with the tax credit, please feel free to comment below or share your experience with applying for the tax credit. But if you have any super complicated tax questions, maybe save those for your accountant. Whew! We made it through the tax video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. It's like a bird. I will do my best to try to keep this fun and not confusing as possible. I just confused myself trying to say that sentence. Am I eligible? Eligible. Eligible? Eligible. Eligible.
Oh God.
Eligible. Did I do it wrong again?